Perfect. Hey everyone, and no one has joined yet. Um, so while we're waiting for everyone to stream in, today we are going to be talking about our DPA hackathon that's coming up next week. Today I'm joined by a few DPA crazy colleagues. I'm going to start off by introducing myself. I'm Nathan Ross Adams, and I am a DPA whisperer at Michelson's. I'm really focused on DPAs when it comes to emerging technologies. That's what I'm really interested in, and cross-border transactions. Next, I'll hand over to our DPA mad scientist, David, to introduce himself.
Thanks very much, Nate. Yeah, I'm the self-styled DPA mad scientist. I like to tinker. So I like to get hold of cool DPA templates and take them apart. I build our templates from the ground up. We built some really great DPA templates at Michelson's with everyone's involvement, but I like to structure them and create the outlines and things. And yeah, I really focus on information security, incident response, that sort of side of DPAs. So thanks very much, Nate.
Perfect, great, David. Next, we have our very own agent DPA decipherer, Lisa Maiwa. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thanks, Nathan. Hi, my name is Lisa Maiwoha. I am the DPA decipherer. I know that's a hard word to deal with, but I really enjoy DPAs along with the rest of the team. I really like engaging with them, trying to understand how they're structured, trying to understand what outcome everyone's trying to achieve, and really just try and make the DPA really usable and practical for the audience and for both parties trying to really come to the level of conclusion. So that's my side with the DPAs.
Perfect. And then last but not least, you've heard of Dr. Love, but have you heard of Dr. DPA? So I'd like to would like Tabile to introduce herself as Dr. DPA.
Cool. Thanks, Nate. Morning, everyone. I'm Tabile Temba, and I'm Dr. DPA. So I'm also interested in, the templates and how just global compliance also on the African scale. And yeah, I'm really interested in InfoSec, and I've been learning a lot of teams, so I'm excited for our session.
Perfect. So just to start us off, I thought I'd ask you guys a quick question to get to know you a bit better. David's going to be caught off guard with this one, but I'll start with Lisa just to sort of prime everything. Lisa, what's one interesting fact about yourself that nobody knows?
Well, you're about to find out today. This one is very funny to me, I think. But my favorite food is pizza, despite being lactose intolerant. So I just flout it and I enjoy my pizza whenever I can.
That sounds pretty messy. So I'm quickly going to go over to David. David, what's one random interesting fact about yourself?
I'm riffing off of what Lisa said because they seem to be food related. So it's also part of my story at Michelson's. But back in the early days of Michelson's, we all used to work from John, our managing attorney's house. We're all over the world and sort of a much bigger team these days. Back then, we cooked lunch for each other once a week. We took our turns. And I was widely regarded as the mad scientist in the kitchen, not just with DPAs. And I had such great hits as frying lettuce and various other things. Suffice to say, John bought me a cookbook once. But the fact that no one knows about me is I can cook, but I have a very narrow stream of cooking. So my girlfriend will tell you I pressure cook everything. I have a digital pressure cooker, and we get a recipe. I'm like, can we make it in a pressure cooker? So that's my speciality when it comes to cooking. And I'm trying to relate it to DPAs. But yeah, I guess it's about having the right tool for the job, automating things. Technology can make things better, and that's what I believe when it comes to cooking and data processing relationships.
Awesome. Tabile, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Nate. So mine is that I love watching National Geographic, but specifically about marine life, marine animals. What's the deepest part of the ocean? Like, what haven't we explored? That kind of thing. So if I'm not working, that's what I'm doing, watching National Geographic.
Deep blue sea. Well, I'm going to return to the food side of things, and my random interesting fact is that I hate chocolate cake, but I love chocolate. I really love chocolate, but I hate chocolate cake. I don't know what it is about chocolate cake. Maybe it's too dense, or maybe I've only had bad chocolate cake. I hope my mother's not listening to this call, but that's about just to start today off, as we mentioned before, today is really a pre-session or pre-event for our DPA hackathon that we're having next week. And the title may seem very interesting to you. And maybe, David, would you just give a brief explanation of what a hackathon is really about and how DPAs would potentially relate to a hackathon?
Yeah, sure. So for me, a hackathon is a concept from the software development world, and it usually means a number of experts in a field coming together. So when I think about it, I sort of think of maybe a weekend project where a bunch of dev teams sign up for like a 24, 48-hour period. They get a theme like maybe, and usually it has some social good to it. So making a piece of software, for example, to make, I don't know, government public data more transparent and usable for the masses. But you're working together to produce something from nothing in a very short space of time. And I think that's the same concept we want to apply to DPAs, where we've got a whole bunch of different clauses and ways of doing things floating out there on the internet. We want to pluck those and, as a team of experts, live put them together to show you how you can make something usable and effective on the fly, basically. I have a background in improv comedy. So I like the idea of improvising and making things as we go. So yeah, looking forward to doing that in a legal context in our hackathon.
Perfect, great. Thanks, David. So yeah, our session is really going to be a unique hackathon. And maybe to start us off, Lisa, why do you think, or does all data protection laws require DPAs, or what's DPAs about really at the end of the day?
So almost all or most, let's say most data protection laws require you to have a data processing agreement or DPA, which is essentially an agreement between the responsible party, controller, and the processor, which really outlines how they will process personal data, their obligations, their responsibilities, things like the security measures they'll put in place. So it's really that type of agreement. And it really is something that's quite foundational and important when it comes to how you're processing personal data, because you want to have something at the outset that really describes how you're going to proceed and what your standards are when it comes to processing personal data.
Perfect. That makes great sense. And just from your perspective, David, does the law give you a template for what DPAs should look like across the globe?
No. So I always say when it comes to DPAs, they're not high velocity contracts yet. So what a high velocity contract is, it's a contract that everyone and their dog understands and knows what should be in that agreement. So a classic example of that is an NDA, right? They've been around for years and years. It's one of the first things any person in a junior, anyone in a junior legal position at a company starts reviewing. You know what can be in it and what can't be in it, right? DPAs have emerged as a way of complying with this requirement that Lisa's identified in relevant data protection laws to have a written contract or mandate between the entities in a processing chain, essentially. So either controller to processor or processor to sub-processor or processor, or on and on from there. And there are strict requirements as to what needs to go into them depending on various laws. So POPIA in South Africa, for example, has only 1 or 2 requirements. But if you go to the GDPR, there's a whole section of requirements that need to go in to make it a valid DPA. But if you want to have one in South Africa, it doesn't mean that you don't want all the things that are seen as being important from a GDPR perspective. And in fact, if you just made a DPA that only had the stuff in it that the law required, it would essentially be an defective DPA, because it's got to regulate this processing relationship between the parties. So it needs to cover all the things that happen. I'll give you a classic example of GDPR says there needs to be audit rights in a DPA, right? But just dealing with audit rights isn't enough to make it clear how audits are going to happen, who's going to pay for them, what process is going to be followed. You need to specify all that sort of stuff in a DPA. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Okay, great. And so basically, you need to understand the role players in the DP space, or the data protection space, and you also need to understand whether how your ordinary contractual obligations, like indemnities, limits of liability, all apply in a DPA context. But it seems like it's a tough job actually becoming an expert on this. And so, Tabile, would you just speak briefly about what it actually takes to become knowledgeable and an expert in DPAs?
Cool. So I think we can all agree that when it comes to data protection, it's a journey. So I don't think you'll ever get to a point where it's like, okay, cool, I'm done learning. There's continuous learning that's taking place, and I think a good place to start is checking what the regulations are in the country where the processing is taking place, and checking what the global regulations are. That's always a good place to start building on your knowledge.
Okay, great. And and it ties in with David's point. I almost feel as though, although in emerging jurisdictions, let's say emerging data protection jurisdictions, we shouldn't reinvent the wheel all the time. Sometimes we need to take guidance from what's happening globally, because there are jurisdictions with established precedent and understanding of how these agreements should work and how to manage relationships. Which actually brings me to our next point on the whole focus of this DPA hackathon is not going to be on boring theory. It's going to be on the typical pain points that you need to deal with in DPAs. And so, Lisa, would you mind just introducing some of the pain points that you find interesting in DPAs?
So I find all the pain points interesting, but some of the key ones that you see over and over again is actually how you deploy it. So when we talk about deployment, we're talking about how both parties can use the DPAs. In some instances, big companies, maybe big processors, decide that they want to put their DPA online, accessible to everyone, and have all of those terms there. Other instances, you might think, let's keep it as an actual contract rather than treating it as terms that we incorporate by reference and things like that. So deployment is really important because there's so many factors to it. You're considering who your audience, well, who the other side is, who you're contracting with, the type of personal data you're processing, a lot of factors. So, which leads into another important aspect of, and another pain point is risk. Ranking your risk and understanding the risk of processing is very, very important. And that's simply because we're not all using personal data in the same way. You might simply be processing names and that's it. Is that high risk? Maybe the volume of the amount of personal data that you're processing increases the risk. So identifying the risk, ranking the risk is very important when it comes to DPAs as well. A crucial part, and I think this is something that David's going to touch on when we have the hackathon, is incident response and information security. This is probably one of the most important parts of your DPA and usually one of the most contentious, because if we look at it from maybe a POPIA perspective, the responsible party is the one that can actually dictate the security measures that you put in place. But practically, they're not experts. If you're dealing with a hosting provider, they understand what they do with personal data. They're the ones that understand their system. So they should have a say in the type of security that needs to be put in place. So that part is really important. And lastly, negotiation. This is all a negotiation at the end of the day. And both parties definitely want to get to a point where there is some level of consensus and a compromise when it comes to your data protection agreement, like any other type of contractual agreement. Thanks, Nathan.
Perfect, great, Lisa. Those are all great points. And just from my perspective, like Lisa, I'm obsessed with DPAs, and I think it's because it's this new type of agreement, the new kid on the block that nobody really understands in detail, but we've spent a lot of time looking at it, so we have probably one of the best understandings of it. But I'm really interested in the how to scope DPAs, who it needs to actually apply to, whether a DPA is even necessary or self-standing DPA is necessary, or whether it can be included in your general terms. I'm also interested in best practices for drafting DPAs. I mean, if a DPA can be a simple one-pager document, I'd be super happy because it would remove the red tape from transactions, commercial transactions. And then also, I'm interested in negotiation, or not negotiation, but rather notification obligations and relationship management. And here I'm speaking about when, during an incident, when you actually need to let someone know that data's been breached, or you just need to manage a change in how data is being processed. How that relationship management takes place is very interesting to me, because what the contracts tend to combine is a combination of clauses that say what you must do and clauses that say how you need to do it. So there's a lot of process-specific clauses or procedural clauses in DPAs which fascinate me. But over to you, David.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, going back to my whole argument that they're not high velocity contracts, even the whole notion of a DPA, people think, oh, data protection law, POPIA, GDPR, one of the requirements is to have a DPA. Nowhere in any data protection law does it say you must have a data processing agreement. This is a term of art that's emerged kind of in the industry for these sorts of things. It does a number of tools. It's essentially the rubber meeting the road in the relationship between the two parties. And if you don't do it through a DPA, you've got to do it in other ways. But the DPA is the way that's evolving and most common for us to do it. And the pain points that I focus on are some that Nate and Lisa have touched on. Really responding to incidents, often a common debate there is, well, how long do I have to respond to you? Because I'm further down the chain. I'm a processor or a sub-processor. You've got this period of 72 hours to notify. Do you then give me a subdivision of that time? Do you give me 48 hours? Do you give me 24 hours? And you can push back on different time limits if you understand that sort of thing. And also, what information do I need to give you to deal with the incident? Am I giving you authority to handle it at the end of the day? Then coming down to InfoSec, there's typically an entire annexure attached to most DPAs setting out the InfoSec requirements. That's what Lisa was talking about, where the controller can end up trying to dictate those to someone. Now, that's fine if you are a processor who only provides services to one controller. But yeah, let's say you're in like the tech industry and you're providing some sort of special software development services to 50 plus controllers, and they all try and give you different InfoSec annexures. That way madness lies. You probably want to draft your own InfoSec annexure then, and it comes back to the negotiation pain point of how do you get them to sign your paper instead of you signing theirs. Then one that I just like to highlight that often ends up being a point of contention is limitation of liability and indemnity. And I think a common myth people get stuck on here is that it's like a normal commercial contract. I can limit my risk to what you paid me in the last 12 months or cap it in that way. Increasingly, regulators don't take kindly to parties trying to stop liability in a way that defeats the rights of the data subject. So the data subject has the rights to claim from whoever is responsible in the processing chain, following the usual responsibility of controller process and things that happen in different countries. But know that a limitation of liability and indemnity clause in a DPA is not the same as one in a normal contract. There's different considerations taking place, and a lot of those considerations are being taken care of. I mean, I think the elephant in the room when it comes to cross-border transfers, which is connected to DPAs, but the similar issue is this recent Schrems fine, where they've essentially said that you can't just use a DPA with standard contractual clauses to allow cross-border transfers to a surveillance state like the US, and essentially it doesn't matter what you put in the DPA, it's invalid. So just to show you with these DPAs, the reason they're so hard to understand and to pin down is because they're moving, right? They're like a shapeshifter. Things are changing the whole time. We got to stay on our toes and be ready to adapt, and they're evolving as we go, which makes them exciting as well.
So adapt or die, basically, or adapt to data. I'm conscious of time, so what I'm just going to do quickly is just tie everything together and say that in the session, half of the session will just be focused on addressing these key pain points that most organizations are struggling with. We'll go through each of these and give you practical tips on how to resolve them and manage them in your organization. We need to emphasize there isn't a one-size-fits-all situation. It really depends on your bargaining power, the power dynamics in the relationship, but also where in the globe you're situated. We draft global, local, and jurisdiction-specific DPAs so we understand how it's interconnected, but that often requires an understanding as well of what each regulator or supervisory authority says regarding DPAs. So we'll touch on some of that. And then the last, which I think is the second part, which is the most exciting part really for us, is we're going to be tearing down through three DPAs of three popular organizations. The one is OpenAI, who owns ChatGPT and the GPT model, and then TikTok, which most of you have heard about. If not, you've probably been living under a rock. And then lastly, Twitter's DPA, that's business focused. So we'll be looking at these international best examples of what DPAs should look like, but you're welcome to bring along your questions to the session as well. So bring along your DPAs. You can sit with it at your computer, ask us specific questions. When you sign up for the hackathon as well, we'll share more details with you. And then lastly, just to say that yes. So lastly, just to add that we'll pop this link into the chat for you to sign up to the hackathon. But basically, it's next week on Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. The cost is 1,234, including that. And it's really going to be a practical session. You shouldn't leave feeling that you've been in a lecture. You should feel as though you've been in a hardcore training workshop where you've actually interacted with the material. But yeah, that's basically it from us today. Any last words from our wonderful team of DPA weirdos? Maybe start with David.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to have some fun, right? I think that's one of the things we specialize in Michelson's is making things practical, and you're going to see us taking actual clauses, taking apart. We're going to plain language stuff. We're going to show you some of our key wording as to what we do and don't put in contracts. How we. I always say you've got to make the agreements comply with the law, but you also got to sugarcoat it, right? You've got to make it a nice pill to swallow because people got to sign this at the end of the day. It's also a commercial contract. If you're looking at a few different suppliers and you see their DPAs and one looks friendly and approachable and is clear, you're going to sign up with that one and not the one that looks like they're trying to exculpate themselves from every form of liability and give you nothing at the end of the day. So we really specialize in making it fun to contract with DPAs, and we're going to show you some of that fun in this session. So yeah, join us.
Perfect. And you, Tabile?
Just that I'm excited, and make sure that you guys come and interact, and yeah, don't let us do all the talking.
Yes, we based on the size of the audience, we can open up so you can ask public questions also if you want to. And over to you, Lisa.
I'm really excited. Everything that David and Tabila have said are really the reasons to come to next week's session. I think it's going to be really fun to do it live together and really break down contracts, talk about the key issues and problems that people face, and provide you with some practical solutions as much as we can. So really, I'm excited. I can't wait. And we'll see you next week.
Yes. So that was last but not Lisa. And so over to me, I just wanted to say that if you're struggling to find the event, just Google DPA Hackathon. We'll be the first ones that pop up. And feel free to, when you sign up, to pop in any questions you may have. There'll be an upload field as well for any documents that you'd like us to have a look at in preparation for the session. But until then, see you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Bye, everyone.